if you look at your question, so at the end of the question, there will be a requirement to compute back. Okay, there will be a requirement to compute cost of capital. Okay. Now, whenever you're required to compute back, your step number one will be to look at the balance sheet. Then step number one, just look at your balance sheet and just see that from how many sources company have raised a finance from. Okay. In step number one, I will simply go and I will look at the balance sheet and I will see that from how many sources company have raised a finance from. Let's say by looking at the balance sheet, you came to know that company have raised a finance from two sources. That is equity and debt. Okay. By looking at the balance sheet, you came to know that company have raised a finance from two sources. That is equity and debt. So it means company have to give return to two parties, right? Company have raised a finance through bank, through debt and equity. So it means company will give return to two parties, right? You will give return to equity holders. So what cost will you bear?
Cost of
equity, right? Second, you will return to debt holders. So what cost will you bear? KT.
Debt.
So
Cost of
that
debt.
will be KE plus KD. We will look at the WACC equation later. I'm just trying to tell you how you have to start your question. Okay. So let's say you look at the balance sheet and you came to know that company have raised the finance from two sources, equity and debt. So it means you have to give return to two parties. You will give return to equity holders. So its cost is known as KE. And I will give return to debt holders. And its cost is known as KD 1 minus T. Okay, so WACC equation that will be somewhere like this. Okay, KE plus KD. Then it is possible that let's say you look at the company's balance sheet and you came to know that company have raised a finance from three sources. Okay, you're looking at company's balance sheet and you came to know that company have raised a finance from three sources: equity, debt, and bank loan. Okay, equity, debt, and bank loan. So it means you have to give return to three parties, right? You have to give return to three parties. I have to give the return to equity holders, debt holders, and bank. So you will give return to equity holders, right? So its cost is known as KE, right? I will give return to equity holder. So its cost is known as KE. Then I have to give return to debt holders, right? So its cost is known as KD 1 minus T. Then I will give return to bank, right? You have raised a finance through bank, right? So you have to give the return to bank. So its cost is known as KB 1 minus T. Okay, so this is how a WACC equation will become. And if I just talk about the maximum, let's say you look at the balance sheet and you came to know that company have raised a finance from four sources: equity, debt, bank loan, and preferentials. That is the maximum, right? Company have raised a finance through debt, equity, bank loan, and preferentials. So it means now I have to give return to how many parties? Four parties, right? You will give return to debt holders. So its cost is known as KD 1 minus T. Then I will give return to equity holders. So its cost is known as KE. Then I will give return to bank. So its cost is known as KB 1 minus T. And finally, I will give the return to preference shareholders, right? And its cost is known as AP. Okay.
No tax savings on the preference shares.
You have to give preference dividend. Okay, that is a cost.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, so this is the maximum, right? That they have raised the finance from all the four sources. Now, normally, if I talk about P4, so in P4, preference shares that doesn't come. At least I have never seen a question on preference shares. Okay, so normally the examiner he stick to three areas: debt, equity, and bank loan. But we will see how to compute its cost. Okay. Now, first of all, let us focus on equity. Okay. First of all, let us focus on equity. So if they raise the finance equity, its cost is known as cost of equity, right? KE. Now let's see how to compute KE. Okay, so KE, that is the return paid to ordinary shareholders, right? Okay, KE is the return paid to ordinary shareholders. So that is a cost for the company. Now basically we have total three methods of computing KE. First is DVM, dividend valuation model. Okay, dividend that stands for dividend valuation model. Then we have CAPM, capital asset pricing model. Okay, then we have CAPM, capital asset pricing model. And number three, we have plus tax equation. Okay, so we have three methods of computing KE, cost of equity. DVM, dividend valuation model, CAPM, capital asset pricing model. Then number three, we have plus tax equation. Now you must have studied DVM and CAPM in your earlier studies. Now this plus tax equation, that is something which is new in P4. Okay. So right now we will just deal with DVM and CAPM. We will deal with plus tax equation later on. Okay. Now over here for plus tax equation, there are a few conditions. Okay. So some strict conditions will apply. Okay. And there are certain conditions. So if those conditions are fulfilled, then only you can use plus tax equation for computing KE. Otherwise, we have two methods, CAPM and okay. Now KE under DVA. Now over here we used a formula which is KE is equal to D1 upon P0 plus G. This is the formula that we use over here. Okay, KE is equals to D1 over P0 plus G. Or you can also write it this way, that KE is equal to D0 1 plus G divided by P0 plus G. So KE, that is cost of equity. D1. D1 is next year dividend. P0, that is current share price. that will be XDIF excluding dividend. Okay, XDIF means excluding dividend. Then G, that stands for growth rate. Okay, so KE under DVM. So for that we use the formula. KE is equal to D1. Okay, D1 that is next year dividend over P naught. P naught is current share price, and G that is your growth rate. Let's say for example, dividend per share is 0.2. Okay, growth rate is 10%. Share prices 20, and we are required to compute KE. Okay, dividend per share that is 0.2. Growth rate is 10%. Share prices compute KE using DVM. Okay, just look carefully over here. KE under DVM that is equal to D1 over P naught plus G, right? D1 over P naught plus G. Now what is D1? Next year expected dividend, right? That is next year dividend. P naught is current share price and G is growth rate. Okay. So if you just look over here, you are given with dividend per share, that is 0.2. Now, if dividend is given in the question and nothing is mentioned, so we will assume that it is current year dividend. Okay, if dividend is given in the question and nothing is mentioned, the examiner is silent. So now I will assume that this is current year dividend. Okay, this is current year dividend. Okay. So KE that is equal to D1, right? D1 that is next year dividend. This is current dividend. I need next year dividend. So how will I compute next year dividend? You're given with the right? Yeah. Okay. So 0.2 multiplied by the growth rate. Growth rate is 10%, right? Okay. So into 1.1 divided by P naught, which is the share price. Share price is 20 plus G. G is 10%, right? So 0.1. So K that will be 11.1%. Okay, so if dividend is given in the question and nothing is mentioned, the examiner is silent. So you will assume that it is current year dividend. Okay, so in this formula, D1 that stands for next year dividend, right? So we are given with the current year dividend and I need next year dividend. So obviously it means I will multiply with the growth rate, right? That will give you with next year dividend over P naught, which is the share price, which is over here it is 20 plus growth rate, which is 10%. Can you please mute your microphone? Okay, now if you just look over here, I told you that over here in this formula, P naught, that is current share price, right? And that will be X diff. Okay, X diff means excluding dividend. Now for cum diff, the examiner will have to mention. Okay, for cum diff, the examiner will have to mention that. If nothing is mentioned, so you will assume that it is X diff. Now, in financial management, we work on X diff values. Okay, in financial management, we work on X diff values, not on cum diff. The reason is because, cum diff value, that is a few day, that only occur at some time. Okay, those are few days value. Right? Because obviously company, they don't pay the dividend on regular basis, right? Cum diff, that is few days value. Okay, because company, they don't pay the dividend on a regular basis. Okay, so that's why over here in financial management we X diff values. Okay, so for cum diff, the examiner will have to mention that thing in the exam. If nothing is mentioned, so you will assume that it is X diff value. Like let's say, for example, let's say D naught, that is £2 dividend per share. Dividend is £2 per share. Okay. And P naught, that is $22, and this is cum diff. Growth rate is 15%, and we are required to compute KE. Yes, try to compute KE using your DVM formula. Okay.
Is it 25?
How much?
25%, 25.4.
No, it should be 26.5%. 26.5. Okay. We have to compute KE using DVM, right? That is D1 over P naught plus G. Okay. So KE is equal to D1. D1 is next year dividend, right? D1 is next year dividend. So now just look over here. The dividend per share is $2. I need next year dividend. So if nothing is mentioned, so I will assume that this is current year dividend. But we need next year dividend. So you will simply multiply with the growth rate. Okay. So 2 into 1.15, right? I will multiply with the growth rate. Divided by P naught. P naught is the current share price, right? So what is the share price over here? 22. But just look over here, this is cum diff. Cum diff means cumulative of dividend. So in this formula, I have to use the ex-diff values. Okay, this is cumulative of dividend. This 22. This is cumulative of dividend. So I need to remove the impact of dividend. Right? This share price is having the impact of dividend. So you need to remove that impact. So 22 minus dividend is 2, right? So minus 2, right? So now this share price, this will become ex-diff. Okay. So divided by 20 plus growth rate, which is 15%. So 0.15. So KE will be 26.5%. Okay. Clear? So this share price, that was cum diff. Okay, cumulative of dividend. So that's why, first of all, you will remove the impact of dividend from this share price. Okay, dividend is 2, right? So 22 minus the dividend of 2, that will give you with the share price of 20. Okay. Now, if I talk about the maximum difficulty level in DVA, so the maximum difficulty level can be that, you know, sometimes the growth rate is missing. That is the maximum difficulty. Okay, the growth rate will be missing. Now, when growth rate is missing, so we have to compute the growth rate. Okay, now for computing growth rate, we have two models. One is Gordon's growth model. Okay, one is Gordon's growth model, and second one is past dividend. Okay, we have two methods for computing growth rate. Okay, so the maximum difficulty level can be that growth rate is missing. So we have two methods for computing growth rate: Gordon's growth model and past dividend. Now, if I talk about Gordon's growth model, so over here we used the equation G is equals to B R E. Okay, we used the equation G is equals to B R E, where B is the retention ratio. Okay, B is the retention ratio. Now, and RE, that is basically equal to return on equity. Okay, RE, that is equal to return on equity. Now, return on equity will be given in the exam. Okay, it will always be given in the exam, so you don't have to worry about it. But if I talk about B, B is the retention ratio, right? So can I say that in simple terms, it means this is the balance of payout ratio. Okay, this is the balance of payout ratio. For example, let's say company's earning per share is 10. Okay, company's earning per share is 10. And dividend paid is 6. Okay, your earning per share is 10 and dividend paid is 6. So the payout percentage is 60%, right? Your payout percentage, that is 60%, right? Earning per share is 10 and dividend paid is 6. So payout percentage will be 60%. So it means it will retain 40%, right? It will retain 40%. Okay. So retention ratio, that is basically the balance of payout ratio. Okay, that is the balance of payout ratio. So it means if I just write down this thing over here, that is B is basically equal to 1 minus payout ratio. Okay, that is equal to 1 minus payout ratio. And payout ratio, that is equal to D naught over EPS, earning per share. Okay, and even if you don't remember this formula, so there is no problem at all. Okay, just remember one thing, that retention ratio, that means the balance of payout ratio. Okay, that means the balance of payout ratio. Okay, my earning per share is 10 and I'm paying a dividend of 6. So payout percentage is 60%. So retention ratio will be, yes, retention ratio will be 40%, right? Retention ratio, that is the balance of payout ratio. Okay. Now, if any one of you want to ask any question, then you can unmute your microphones, okay? Okay, so this is the first model for computing growth rate. Okay, this is the first model for computing growth rate. G is equals to B R E. Then we have second method of computing growth rate, that is past dividend. Okay, where you will compute the growth rate using the using the past dividend. Okay, and the history of dividend, where you will use the formula, which is latest dividend over earliest dividend into 1 upon n minus 1. Okay, in the second model, which is also known as historical growth model. Okay, historical growth model, or you can say past dividend, it means the same. We used a formula which is latest dividend over earliest dividend into power 1 upon n minus 1. Now n over here does not means number of year. Okay, n over here does not means number of year. Okay, it basically means number of growth. Okay, it does not mean number of years. It means the number of dividend growth. Like, let's say, for example, if you are given with the data of 5 years, okay, you're given with the dividend for 5 years. So in 5 years, dividend can grow for how many years? For 5 years, if you're given with the data of for 5 years. So in 5 years, the dividend can grow for 4 times, right? It can grow for 4 times. So n will be 4. Let's say, for example, you are given with a dividend for 6 years. So in 6 years, dividend can grow 5 times, right? It can only grow for 5 years. Okay, so n will be 5. Let's say if you're given with the data for 7 years. Okay, you're given with the data for 7 years. You're given with a dividend for 7 years. So in 7 years, the dividend can grow for 6 years, right? It can grow 6 times. Okay, so n will be 6. Okay, so we have two methods for computing growth rate: Gordon's growth model and past dividend. Now in Gordon's growth model, we use the equation G is equals to B R E. Right? That is what you have studied in F9. Now let me tell you one thing over here. Now in P4, in P4 we used the equation G is equals to B K E. Okay, we will replace this equation with this equation. G is equals to B KE. Okay, in P4 we use this equation. This is the equation that you have studied in F9. Okay, but over here in P4 we will replace this equation with this one. Okay, G is equals to B KE. Okay, where B is the retention ratio and KE, that is cost of equity. Then we have past dividend model, okay, historical growth model, where you will use the formula latest dividend over earliest dividend into 1 over n minus 1. And now the question is, which model should I use? That will depend upon the question. Okay, that will depend on the question. Okay, so we can't say that in the exam you have to follow Gordon's growth model or you will always follow past dividend. No, that will depend upon the question. Okay,